Hi, welcome to my studio. I'm Gregg Perry. Today we're going to talk about plastering. Um, some issues arose many months ago with my clients in the southern New Jersey area. We cannot, I cannot find skilled craftspeople, let alone artists, to perform any of the basic architectural restoration, conservation needs for 18th century houses in the area. Today we'll dwell specifically on plasters. There's no plasters in the Salem, Cumberland, or Gloucester County. There's a lot of charlatans and mountebanks, but there's no one of any skill. Um, so I will go through a dissertation here of how I handle plastering in my applications. Okay, so we're going to start with ceilings. Plastering an historic building is like a family album. The handwriting of the artisans, the taste of the original occupants, and the evolving styles of decorations are embodied in the fabric of the building. From modest farmhouses in this area to Georgian to Grade 2 listed buildings in England, which I have taken a part in their conservation, regardless of the ethnic origin of the occupants, plaster has traditionally been used to finish interior walls. A versatile material, plaster could be applied over brick, stone, half timber, or frame construction. It provided a double surface that was easy to clean and that could be applied to a flat or curved walls and ceilings. Plaster could be treated in any number of ways. It could receive stenciling, decorative painting, wallpaper, or whitewash. This variety and the adaptability of the material to any building size, shape, or configuration meant that plaster was the wall surface chosen for buildings since 1710, whether it be in England or in America in the colonies. Historic plaster may first appear so fraught with problems that its total removal seems the only alternative. But there are practical and historical reasons for saving it. First, three-coat plaster is unmatched in strength and durability. It resists fire and reduces sound transmission. Next, replacing plaster is expensive. A building owner needs to think carefully about the condition of the plaster that remains. Plaster is often as badly damaged as it appears first. It must be looked at quite acutely. Of more concern to preservationists, scholars, and historians, however, original lime and gypsum plaster is part of the building's historic fabric. Its smooth, troweled, or textured surfaces and subtle contours evoke the presence of the world's earlier craftspeople. Plaster can also serve as a plain surface for irreplaceable finishes. For both reasons, plaster walls and ceilings can contribute to the historic character of interiors and should be left in place and repaired if all possible. The approaches described in this brief stress repairs using wet plaster and traditional materials and techniques that will best assist the preservation of historic plaster walls and ceilings and their appearance. I will not be broaching the topic of drywall repairs in this dissertation. Thus, a veneer plaster system will be discussed rather than drywall. Veneer systems include a coat or coats of wet plaster, although thinly applied, which can, to be a great extent, simulate traditional hand-troweled or textured finish coats. The system is generally better suited to historic preservation projects than drywall. To repair plaster, a building owner must often enlist the help of a professional plasterer, which, as I just said, in southern New Jersey and the Delaware area, we have virtually none. There's a few in Philadelphia. Plastering is a skilled art and craft, requiring years of training and specialized tools, and by chance most of these tools are available and from England, the better tools. While minor repairs can be undertaken by building owners, most repairs will require the assistance of a professional plasterer. Plasters have relied on two materials to create their craft over the years since around 1710, lime and gypsum. Until the end of the 19th century, plasters only used lime plaster. Lime plaster was made from ingredients lime, aggregate, fiber, and water. The lime came from ground and heated limestone of oyster shells, the aggregate from sand, and the fiber from cattle or hog hair. Manufacturing changes at the end of the 19th century made it possible to use gypsum as the plastering material of choice. Gypsum and lime plasters were used in combination for the base and finish coats for the early parts of the 20th century. Gypsum was eventually favored because it set more rapidly and initially had a harder finish. Not only did the basic plastering material change, but the method of application changed also. In early period construction, the windows, doors, and all other trim were installed before the plaster was called in and applied it to the wall. Generally, the woodwork was prime painted before plastering. Obtaining a plumb, level wall while working against build-up moldings must have been quite difficult in this period. But sometime in the first half of the 19th century, builders began selling wooden plaster grounds around windows and doors at the end of base walls. Installing these grounds so that they were level and plumb made the job much easier because the plaster could work from a level, plumb, and straight surface. Woodwork was then nailed to the grounds after the walls were plastered. Evidence of plaster behind trim is also and often an aid in dating historic homes or to discerning their physical evolution in time. Let's talk about lime plaster. When building a house, plasters traditionally mixed bags of quicklime with water to hydrate or slake the lime, as we term it in the conservation industry. As the lime absorbed the water, heat was driven off or given off, and the heat diminished, and the lime and water were thoroughly mixed. The lime putty that resulted was used to make plaster. When the lime putty, sand, and water and animal hair were mixed together, the mixture provided the plaster with, as what is called in the profession, coarse stuff, a coarse stuff mixture. This mixture was applied in one or two layers to build up the wall thickness. But the best plastering was done in three coats. The first coats were made up of the coarse stuff. The first was a quote scratch coat and the brown coat. The finished plaster, called setting stuff, contained a much larger portion of lime putty, the aggregate and no fiber, and gave the wall a smooth and white surface finish. Compared to the 3/8 inch thick layers of the scratch and brown coats, the finished coat was a mere 1/8 inch thick. Additives were used for various quantities and qualities. For example, fine white sand was mixed for a float finish. This finish was popular in the early 1900s when the plasterer raked the sand with a broom. The plastered wall would retain swirl marks or stipples. Or marble dust may have been added to create a hard finish white coat which could be smoothed and polished with a steel trowel and a lot of skill. Finally, a little plaster Paris, or gouged stuff as it was termed, was often added to the finished plaster to accelerate the setting time. Although lime plaster was used primarily in this country and in Britain until the 1900s, it had certain disadvantages. A plaster wall could take more than a year to dry, unfortunately. This delayed painting or papering or any other stenciling preparation. In addition, bag thick quicklime had to be carefully protected from contact with air, or it became inert because it reacted with ambient moisture and carbon dioxide. Around 1900, gypsum began to be used as a plastering material. Let's talk about gypsum plaster. Gypsum begins to cure as soon as it is mixed with water. It sets in minutes and completely dries in 2 to 3 weeks. Historically, gypsum makes a more rigid plaster and did not require a fibrous binder. However, it is difficult to tell. This is very important for scholars and investigators to tell the difference between lime and gypsum plaster once the plaster is cured. So we really don't know the time frame of the house in question or the plastering job in question. Despite these desirable working characteristics, gypsum plaster was more vulnerable to water damage than lime. Lime plasters had often been applied directly to masonry walls without lathing, forming a suction bond. They could survive occasionally wind-driven moisture or water wicking up from the ground. Gypsum plaster needed protection from water. Furring strips had to be used against masonry walls to create a dead air space for proper curing. This prevented the moisture transfer. In rehabilitation and restoration projects, one should rely on the plasterer's judgment whether to use lime or gypsum plaster. In general, gypsum plaster is the material plasters use today. Different types of aggregate may be specified by the architect or conservationist, such as clean river sand, perlite, pumice, or vermicular. However, if historic finishes and textures are being replicated, sand should be used as a base coat aggregate. Today, if fiber is required as a base coat, a special gypsum is available which includes wood fibers. Lime putty mixed with about 35% gypsum to help a harden is still used as a very fine finish coat. Let's go